Hello, everyone. We are going to get started in just a few minutes. So thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we're going to build an entire site in Framer. Let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments section. And if you've got any questions throughout this workshop, feel free to write them in the chat and either myself or someone from my team will help answer. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. And thanks so much for coming out. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special workshop. I'm Ryan. If I haven't met you yet, it's great to meet you. And today we're going to talk about going from zero to Framer. Now, let's look at what we're actually going to look at today. So firstly, I'm going to give you a quick introduction about myself. We're going to look at why Framer and why so many designers are switching to it. We're going to look at the building blocks, so the real core fundamental principles that you need to know to then build your first site. And I'm going to take those fundamentals and we're actually going to, build our first site. We're going to build an entire page and publish it live on the internet. I'm going to make it fully responsive as well. And if you get through all that, I've actually got a special gift at the end for you. So if you hang around, there's something special just for you. So quickly, a little introduction about myself. I'm Ryan. I am a Framer mentor. Now, what essentially that means, and I'm very fortunate to say that Framer is my full-time job, has been for the past couple of years. Essentially, what I do is I build products and education for Framer. I love Framer. It's honestly changed my life. I've been a designer for almost 10 years now, which is just insane. And building sites in no-code platforms like Webflow for about 7. And a couple of years ago, I discovered Framer and it just kind of completely changed everything. Now, we'll talk a little bit about why in a second, but essentially anything you can sort of label you can do as a designer. I've probably done it for clients at one point, whether it be websites, branding, graphic, anything. I'm sure I've charged for it at some point for a freelance client. But really the big turning point for me was building these websites with no code, because suddenly I wasn't reliant on a developer. I was the developer, but I didn't need to know how to code. So I was the designer who could design, yes, but also develop and publish to the internet with speed. And I essentially became a full stack designer, which is why I love Framer so much, because it's got a familiarity to designers, but it also gives them the powers to be a developer. So Framer itself, they've been around for a while. If you don't actually know, they actually were a prototyping tool previous to Framer sites. And then a few years ago, they kind of pivoted towards this kind of website marketing site sort of era. And now so many designers use them. I go to events all the time and I'm very surprised at how many people are actually actively using Framer now, which is super exciting. And as you can probably tell from the UI, it feels very familiar, right? Almost gives Figma vibes if we want to go down that route. It's got the freeform canvas, it's got the layers and pages on the left-hand side. Then you've got your properties panel on the right-hand side, so you can actually tweak things visually. And for designers, this makes a lot of sense. It's intuitive, it makes sense. It's not a massive learning curve, especially to other platforms like Webflow, but it's also not as limiting compared to other platforms like Wix or Squarespace. So Framer has really found themselves a nice niche, which is really great for designers. But I think the real power with Framer is for marketers as well, because a lot of the clients that we serve as designers are marketing teams. That's really what Framer is used for. And you can use Framer. I like to say Framer is really just a canvas, not just a website builder, because I'll explain later on some of the really cool use cases that people are being able to pull from it, from like e-commerce stores and membership sites and so much more. But really kind of their bread and butter is around marketing sites and quite large marketing sites too. There's a ton of really big teams from Perplexity to Whereby and so many more that are actually using Framer to power their marketing sites. And for a marketer, it's really great because they don't have to go back and forth with the developers. They can just either work directly with the designer, or better yet, they can jump on the canvas themselves to edit stuff visually. So let's actually talk about the key concept of Framer, which, like the name suggests, is frames. Everything is just frames. And this is the same concept for any website that's built on the internet. Frames or boxes. Now, essentially, a website is a box or a frame within a box, within a box, within a box, and so on, right? Everything's just made of boxes or frames. And we kind of use this core concept to actually build things in Framer as well. Now, let's take actually the Figma homepage, for example. Now, when we look at this, we've got a bunch of text, we've got the nav bar, we've got some buttons, we've got some imagery. But really, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of boxes. We've got the entire box or container that's actually holding the entire hero section together. We have the nav bar, which is yet another box. We have that sort of box on the left-hand side that's actually containing the text and the button. That'd be a box. Even the button itself is literally just a box with some text in it. And then, of course, the images, which also act as a box. So let's take another example here, the framer.com homepage. What do we see? We've got some text and we've got some imagery. It's just a bunch of boxes. So when we actually kind of strip back the visual stuff, essentially it's a real skeleton, right, of just boxes. And like I mentioned, we refer to these as frames in Framer. And frames are literally how we build everything. So when we kind of strip back those frames and just add the visual stuff, we get a complete website. Now, let's actually talk a little bit around the anatomy of frames, because as we kind of go through this workshop here today and actually build our first site, there might be some key terminology that you might want to know. So when we talk about the structure of frames, we obviously have a frame itself, which is just a box, but then we can nest those frames inside of each other, which is essentially having a group with layers inside of it. And you might have a layer with another layer inside of it, and then a layer inside of that, and so on. And it can get quite deep. So when we kind of look at this family tree of frames, we can actually refer to these as specific things. So for example, if you have a frame, and then if you have a frame inside of that frame, we might actually refer to that as its child frame. It's its child, right? But maybe we've got a frame, and then on top of that frame, we've got another frame. We might refer to that as a parent frame. And this can go up the tree as well to a grandparent frame and so on. So when we talk about structure of frames and layers in Framer, we might use some of this terminology. So let's take a look at the actual build we're going to build today. We're going to build this nice hero section. It's a single pager website. We're going to have some cool like little icons and graphics there. We're going to have some text. We're going to have a call to action button, and we're going to make this responsive as well. So let's actually jump over to Framer so we can kick this off. So here I am inside of Framer, a brand new project. Haven't touched anything new. I've just clicked on new project. And we actually need to go ahead and actually start building our site. Now, I do have this design up on my Figma on the left-hand side. So if you ever see me glancing across, you know why that is. But the first thing we're actually going to do is press F on our keyboard, which is the main shortcut you need to learn with Framer. If you're a shortcut person or not, please learn how to use the F key on your keyboard, because it's going to do a lot. Otherwise, you can just go to layout at the top here and there is frame, but you know, pressing F is a little bit quicker. Now, what I'm going to do is just draw this frame on the canvas. Now, if I go to my layers tab on the left-hand side, you can see we have that frame here selected. Now, when I select an element on the canvas, you'll notice that the properties panel appears. Now, inside the properties panel, just like Figma, we can tweak any sort of styling, whether it be the background color, the radius. We've got a lot of controls here to actually make something visually stunning. But in this case, I actually want to set this up as my background color. So I'm going to click onto fill here, and I'm going to paste in my hex code from Figma. Now, what I can do is actually create this as a new style. And this means it's going to be a global style for my entire site, which means if I update this instance of that color, it's going to update everywhere that color appears. So we'll call this our navy blue, and we'll just kind of let that sit there. Now, what I'm going to do inside this canvas here is we're actually going to set the dimensions or the size of this section. Now, this section is going to hold all of our content for our entire page. Now, if you're used to Figma, you're probably used to using fixed widths and heights, which is basically just pixels, right? I can set the width of this to be 1,000 pixels, and it's going to be that so. But when we actually look at the web, we actually want to use some other sort of sizing principles. Now, there's fixed, there's relative, there's fill, and there's fit content. We'll probably cover most of these today, but let's actually look at relative for now, because relative is really important because it uses percentages instead of pixels. It means everything is going to be relative based on the percentage that you set, which means that if I set the width of this to be, say, 80%, it's going to take up 80% of the frame that it's in, which in this case is the breakpoint, aka the page itself. Now, if I go up to the top right here, I've got this little preview button, and I can actually preview what my live site will look like. Now, I can also resize this page to check responsiveness. And you'll notice as I kind of make things smaller or bigger, that frame, this box in the middle, is actually changing size. It's actually being flexible. It's being responsive. And that's because we set it to 80% width, which means it's always going to stay at 80% width, no matter what size the page is. And this is how we create true responsiveness. So in this case, I'm actually going to set the width to 100%. And what we're going to do with the height is we're actually going to set the viewport height to be 100 VH. So it's going to take up the height of the viewport of the browser. Now, obviously, this isn't really aligning super correctly just yet. So I'm going to go to the parent frame, which is going to be the desktop layer here. And I'm going to turn layout on. Now, inside of Framer, we refer to layout as stack and grids. Now, grids is, well, a grid, but a stack is essentially auto layout in Figma or Flexbox in Webflow if you're familiar. Please learn this. I know that some people, like personally, inside of Figma, I don't use auto layout. Yes, I'm one of those people. But inside of Framer, it's very critical to get proper layout structure and responsiveness. So when we refer to layouts here, we've got stack, which is going to be the most common one that you use. We can set the direction of our content, so whether we want it to be horizontal or vertical. We can set the distribute, so where does it actually start, the alignment, the wrap, the gap, which is the space between elements, or the padding, which is like the invisible border on the outside of that frame, which kind of pushes everything a little bit more in, which you'll see as we kind of go along. So let's actually rename this and let's call this our section. Now, inside this section here, we're going to start by adding some text. So I'm going to press on T on my keyboard and we're going to type out a word. Let's just make this white for now. And let's actually make it my favorite typeface, which is Bricolage Grotesque. And we'll make that extra bold here and we'll just scale this up. Okay, cool. Now, what I could actually do is go to insert here. I'm going to go down to creative and we're going to go down to fit text, which is a custom sort of like component here that we have. And I'm going to set the width of this to be 100%. And then this special component here is actually going to set the width to be automatically, it's basically going to automatically size the text on the page based on the width. So in this case, 1200 pixels, and we'll make that white. Now, this is a bit more of a special thing. You don't necessarily have to do this. And as you can tell, it's just normal text inside a Framer. But in this case, we'll just get rid of that first one. Okay, so what we'll actually do is we'll make sure this layout is set on inside the section as well. So we'll turn layout on. And we're going to set the distribute to be to the start and vertical, so it goes to the very top. Now, inside my desktop breakpoint here, I'm actually going to set the height to be auto, aka fit content. And this essentially fits all the content and has no more space than is required. So this is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead here and actually pull in a bit of a baby blue sort of color. So we'll paste that in here. And we'll also create this as a accent, as a color style here as well. And this is looking pretty good. So now if I scale this, you'll notice that text is scaling with the page itself because we set the width here to be 100% in size. Okay, this is looking good. Now let's actually go ahead and do a little bit more to our structure. So I also want to have a button at the bottom right here. So we're just going to, like I mentioned earlier, this is just a frame with some text in it. So I'm going to draw a new frame on the canvas. And we'll double click to add some text and we'll make it say, let's chat. And we'll also set the font here. Now we also have text styles, which is very similar to color styles. I'm not going to worry about it too much today, but it is definitely something worth looking at. And let's set the width and height of this button to be auto. So what I'm going to do is select that frame. I'm going to set the width to be fit content and the height to be fit content as well. So you notice it's just taking up the amount of space that's required. Now we'll call this a button. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some outer padding. So we're going to add 20, that's a little bit too much. Let's go 15 pixels. And we can even change the individual side here. So maybe on the top and bottom, we want it to be just a little bit less. Let's go 12. And let's also set that background color to be our blue. And let's set this one to be our navy blue. Okay, and let's also add a radius here as well. And that looks pretty good. So that's basically a button. And if we want to add a link, we can just click on that and we can add a link to wherever we want. Maybe we want to make it go external. So we'll go mail to and then an email address. And that's just fine. Now, inside of Framer, we have something called components as well, which is essentially a global system for a design element. So a button, a navbar, a footer, basically anything in Framer that you want to kind of reuse across multiple pages or sections, you probably want to consider making it a component. Now, to do this, and a button's a great example for this, what I can do is actually right-click that frame and go create component. And you can call this whatever you want. Let's just call it button. And then we get taken to the component canvas. Now with components, we have variants and we have variables. Variables affects essentially the initial instance or the one instance of the variant that's on the page. And then variants is like a different version of that component. So for example, you might have a primary variant and then you might have a secondary variant. So if I click on the little plus here, we can kind of create a duplicate of this button and then change the styling. So let's say we wanted to make it a white button, we could do that. Then when I go back to my home here, you'll notice that this sort of like button frame now has like a purple sort of button, and now it is a component. And then inside my properties panel at the bottom right, we have this component controls here, and we can actually switch the variants. So it means I can have one button component, but multiple variants. So it actually allows us to create a really clean design system. Now, I want this kind of button here to appear at the bottom right. So we need to do a little bit of work to the actual layout here to get this to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a new frame on the canvas, and I'm going to be calling this my container. And we're going to set the width of this to be, yet again, 100%. And we'll leave the height for now. And we'll get rid of this background fill. And what I'm going to do is take this button and I'm going to drag and drop it inside my container. Now it's obviously disappeared. So what I need to do is turn the layout on so I have control over the layout. And I'm going to set the distribute to be to the end. And we're going to set it to be to align to the bottom as well. Okay, great. So we kind of have these two sections here. And the other thing I'm going to do is set the height of my container now to be fit content by typing auto. Now, what I can do is essentially I want to push everything as far as it can away from each other. I want the text to be right at the top, but I also want the button to be right at the bottom. So if I select the section frame here, which holds the text itself plus the container, what I can do is select that section and I can set the distribute to be space between, which is going to push things as far as they possibly can. Now, Obviously, this button in the corner, it's done what we want. It's the position that we want, but we need to add a little bit of padding on the outside so it's not right up against the edge. So if we go, say, 20 pixels, let's go a little bit more. Let's go, say, 25. Then that's looking pretty good. Okay, great. Now I also want some text on the right-hand side here too. So let's go ahead here and just write something. Now this is going to be way too big, so let's just size this down just a tad. Let's go 28. Even that's a little bit too big for me. Let's go 24. And then I also want to have a bit of subtext here as well. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to copy over some text, and I'm going to change it to a different font. And let's actually make this white, and we'll create that as a new style as well. And let's just change the weight here, and let's also change this to be about 16 pixels. Okay, great. Now I kind of want both these sort of text elements here to kind of sit at the bottom left. So what I'm going to do is select both those text layers, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to go add frame. Now you'll see they're kind of grouped together inside their own frame, and we'll call this our content. Now, what I'm going to do is turn layout on so we have some more control. I'm going to set the alignment to be to the left and distribute to the very top of that frame. Now, obviously this is overflowing a little bit too much here. So what I'm actually going to do is set a fixed width. So it's always going to stay that size of around 300 pixels. So no matter how big or small I make my screen, because that width is set to fixed, it's always going to stay that size. But you'll kind of notice we have this weird issue here with the text overflowing. That's because by default in Framer, text is automatically set to fit content. Where if we set it to say 100% or fill, which is basically the same thing, then it's going to overflow correctly. So I'm going to do this on both my text elements here. And maybe I want this to actually go across 2 lines, so I could just do that. And then maybe we make this a little bit smaller as well. Let's say we want it to be 220 pixels. Now, I'm also going to set the height at the bottom here to be fit content by typing auto. And then what I'm actually going to do is take this content frame that I have here, and I'm going to drag it inside my container. And then it's going to follow the layout rules of that container itself. Now I'm going to move this above the button here because we read from left to right or top down. And then inside this container, similar to the section, I'm going to set the distribute to be spaced between, so everything gets pushed as far as it needs to. Okay, we have a pretty good looking structure here, right? And I kind of can make this a bit more flexible, and you'll notice it's starting to be quite responsive because we've built it in a clean way. So let's go ahead here and do a little bit more. So let's go ahead and add in our image. And I'm going to set this in the center, and I kind of want this to be quite big and overlapping the text a little bit. Now, in this case, we're going to use the positioning type of absolute. Now, when we use absolute positioning, we're essentially taking that frame or whatever it is, we're keeping it inside the section that might have, say, layout turned on, but we're kind of like detaching it from the layout rules itself. The example I like to use is, imagine you're at a dining table, right? And you're sitting around and there's, say, 6 or 7 people around this table. You pick up your chair and you move, right? You move to another corner of the room, somewhere else. You haven't affected anyone else, but you're still part of this sort of dining setting. That's exactly what absolute layout is, which means I can kind of position this or use this sort of like pinning elements at the top here to set exactly, and I've got alignment tools up the top here too, to set exactly where this is going to be while keeping it within this frame, which has layout on, but we're kind of ignoring that layout option. Now, if there's a reason why this, say, text is behind something and we want to make it in front, when we set absolute positioning on, we get this Z index, and the higher the Z index, the higher it's going to appear on the page. So if we just set this to 1, everything else is kind of set to a default of 0, so it should just work just fine. Now let's make this a little bit bigger. Now, if we want to go further, we could also make this like a percentage. So we might actually want to set this to be 80%. And then kind of as I make this bigger or smaller, that's going to respond based on the size. Okay, fantastic. So the only other thing that I really want to do here is have a little bit of control over this button. So for example, this is just a button. There's no real link set up or anything like that. And I can even add a hover state to this button too. So if I press on hover here, we might want to make it that on hover, we want this to get just a little bit darker. And we also want to set the link. Now we can set the link as a variable. So you'll notice in the component canvas here on the properties panel, we have these little pluses. Now, anytime there's a little plus within the component here, that means we can create a variable, which means for that instance of the component on the page, we might want to tweak that specific field. So for example, we might want to create a variable for the link, which it has done just here, or we might even want to create a variable for the color. So the background color. So now when I go to my home page, you'll notice when I select that component, we can actually change that color or variable just for that instance of the component, but it doesn't affect every component. Where if I did make a change specifically in here, so if I change the radius to be 0, it would change everywhere where that component occurs because it is a global element. So in this case, we just want to set the link. So we'll just set this to be my email. And now just for this button, it's linking to that email. Okay, and like I said, we've also got variants. So if I want to switch that, then my variables copy across as well. So this is looking pretty good. Let's do one more thing here, which is going to be a little bit more stylish, but I'm actually going to draw a new frame and we're going to call this our border. And I'm going to set the width of this to be 100%. And we're going to set the height to be fill, meaning it's going to take up as much remaining space as it has. Now, what I'm going to do here is actually set a bit of a border. So we'll go down to border here. We'll make this say white, and we'll actually drop the opacity of this. It doesn't need to be anywhere near as strong. And what I also want to do is go to my section here. We're going to set the distribute to be to the start now because we're actually kind of keeping this space the same because we've got this section in the middle, which is filling the content. So it's just filling the remaining space anyway and pushing these things which have a fixed height to where they need to go. And then when we have this set to start, we can increase the gap, which is essentially the space between all the elements within the frame, and that'll be set consistently. So say if we set it to 20 pixels, then the gap between this container here and the gap between this text frame here is going to be 20 pixels. Cool, this looks great. Let's preview this and let's just check the responsiveness. It's pretty close, but it's not perfect. So when we look at responsiveness, we're essentially talking about breakpoints in Framer. Now, breakpoints, when we refer to this on a website, is the point or the width of a page of when the layout changes. So when you actually take your browser on the internet and you kind of resize it, at some point the layout almost changes completely. And at that specific width, that is what we call a new breakpoint. So by default, the sort of 3 most common breakpoints are desktop, tablet, and mobile. And we kind of have these by default in Framer already. So I can create a tablet breakpoint, and already that looks pretty good. I'm not really going to touch this too much. Maybe I want to reposition my plane so it sits a little bit higher up. And then we also have mobile as well, which will need just a little bit of work. So again, we'll kind of change this. But essentially what's happening is when I preview this, once my browser gets to a specific width, you will notice that little change or jump in the plane there. That means the layout's changing completely. And we're actually changing the layout to that next breakpoint. So same with the phone here. Let's make this a little bit different. And I reckon what we'll do is we'll actually change the layout of this container. So I might actually make it vertical, and we'll set the alignment to be to the left. And we're actually going to change the distribute to be to the start. Now I can change the width here to be 100%. Again, work in percentages, please, as much as you can, because it'll actually save you a ton of time and actually will allow you to build things properly. And maybe this button here, instead of fit content, we'll set it to be 100% because it's on mobile. Okay, that's basically it. So now when we preview this site, you'll notice it should have full responsiveness. Yeah, awesome. Now, before we publish this to the internet, the one thing we need to do is make sure that our site settings are set up correctly. So inside your site settings here, you can set the site title, the description, which is super handy for SEO and Google. So I might call this my first site, and we'll click on save. We can also set a custom domain if we want to too. There's redirects. This is for your form submissions, and you've got your plans in here as well when you're ready to upgrade. But basically, once you're ready to push this live to the internet, all you need to do is click that blue publish button at the top right corner. And when you do this for the first time, Framer will actually generate a domain for you, and we'll click on that. And let's actually open that up and see what that looks like on the internet. So let's actually jump out of this for just a second and let's open this up. Okay, fantastic. Now, obviously I've got my little maiden Framer badge that's covering my button, which is hilarious. But if I try to drag this down, you'll see that we actually have this as a responsive website, which is super awesome. So that's essentially how you build a site in Framer. Now, obviously there's a lot more to cover and a lot more to learn with Framer, but when we look at the sort of like key fundamentals and key principles, hopefully this gave you a bit of insight into the best way to actually build a site in Framer. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit before you go about the Ultimate Framer Masterclass, which is my complete A to Z learning experience for Framer. Now, like I mentioned, we've covered the real bare bones today, some of the real fundamentals, but if you want to not just learn Framer, but master it and become a really highly valuable and irreplaceable designer, which, let's be honest, we need to go this way because just designing and pushing pixels on a canvas isn't enough. We need to become publishers, not prototypers, right? Then this is why I created the Ultimate Framer Masterclass, because it's been a game changer for me to become a full stack designer, and Framer itself has been the sort of unlock for me to actually make money and become irreplaceable as a designer. So that's why I launched the Ultimate Framer Masterclass, which is actually the third edition of this course now. It's got over 800 students already learning Framer and leveling up with Framer. It's been around for the last couple of years, and now we've kind of just like relaunched everything with over 100 new lessons on basically every topic you can imagine and over 10 hours of content. And we'll actually pull all this together, all this content. We'll build multiple live websites from a portfolio site, a marketing site, even an e-commerce store to really push Framer to its limits. There's a lot to explore. Like I mentioned, there's lots of hands-on opportunities, lots of opportunities to kind of follow along and see what's being built. And on top of that too, a really big bit of feedback that we got from the previous iterations of the course was it's one thing to just watch the video lessons and get a lot of value from that, but it's actually applying that knowledge as well. So alongside the masterclass, you'll actually get 12 weeks of mentoring from myself and my team of Framer experts. We run office hours once a month. We have live experts that actually come in and run live workshops just like this one for you guys specifically in our private community. There's a lot of sort of like job opportunities and opportunities to meet other people in the same sort of space as well. And by far, because this is a new released course, it is the most up-to-date place to learn Framer anywhere in 2025. I guarantee it, to be honest. It's brand new content. It's brand new everything. I've put so much sweat and tears into this over the past number of months, basically 6 months to build this thing, to build not just a course, but an entire learning experience for Framer. It's got exercises. It's got challenges. You can earn badges and certificates. We've built an entire course platform on Framer to really make this the best experience possible. And when we look at actually what you'll learn, the course is actually broken up into sort of 3 phases. You've got fundamentals, you've got intermediate and advanced. Fundamentals will cover everything from sizing, positioning, layout, the building blocks, and we'll actually go more in depth to them and when or where to use them. We'll cover things like basic effects. We'll go into components, which are super powerful, and so much more. SEO, site settings, everything you kind of need to learn the fundamentals of Framer. Then in the intermediate section, we'll actually kind of level up and we'll look at some more advanced use case. So more advanced building blocks, how to utilize components to create keyframe animations, how to do the really cool stuff that you see on Framer on the internet that feel a little bit more advanced and a bit more challenging. But to be honest, they're not. You just need to know how to actually do it. And then lastly is about actually applying it and making money with Framer, getting a return on investment. We're going to talk about pricing, pitching clients, my client workflow that I use for actually building Framer sites for clients, everything you need to actually make money with Framer. Now, if you do want to check out the course, head to the ultimateframercourse.com. It's there. You can get all the information. You can get a sneak peek of all the content and everything you need to know about the actual program itself. And because you've joined this workshop, I told you there'd be a gift, and I'm very confident you're going to absolutely love the masterclass that just for you, for the next 48 hours only, if you use the code workshop25, all capitals, in checkout, you'll get a 25% discount. That's quite a big discount. I don't know why we're making it that big, but I genuinely believe this course is like one of the greatest things I've ever released in terms of content. So I really want to just get as many people on there as possible and mastering Framer and becoming just highly valuable web designers. So again, for the next 48 hours, if you want to use that code workshop25, it's just for you. And again, you can head to ultimateframercourse.com to actually sign up and get all the relevant information. That's basically it. Thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you've got a lot of value out of this free workshop today, and hopefully I'll see you on the other side in the Ultimate Framer Masterclass. But if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Probably Twitter is the best place, at the Ryan Hayward, or I create a ton of content on YouTube. Just Google Ryan Hayward Framer and I'm sure something will come up there. So if you want to keep learning, there's all those sort of channels there. But otherwise, I'll see you in the course and have a great rest of your day. Thanks all.
All the cards and always kept me in the dark. I never thought I could shake this heartache until I saw your light, and it's got me feeling like life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like I've been walking on air. Left all my worries and cares. I've got no burdens around you. I don't care who knows I love you. 'Cause I've been so lost without you. And in my darkest times, you got me feeling like life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Darkest times, you got me feeling like
Thank you everyone for joining. I hope that was really valuable, and yeah, just thank you again for hanging out for me late on a Friday night. And again, if you want to get the masterclass, it's on sale for the next 2 days at the ultimateframercourse.com. But apart from that, I'm actually taking 2 weeks off, so got some content prepared, so don't worry, there's still going to be some Framer tutorials going out. But until then, I'll catch you guys next time.